Fury Warrior has been reworked in the War Within, and I've played both Slayer and Mountain Thane, and we will talk about all three of these and why the rework might not be that great. Starting it really quick, the class talent tree, in all honesty, are a big upgrade from what we have right now in Dragonflight in terms of their overall layout, their arrangement within the tree, and the options that they give you. There is throughput, specifically organized in the tree to be accessible and to not give you a lot of bad feeling options. Some of the throughput you might never take or get to because it's just way too expensive, and that is a problem that we will be getting to eventually. But the upside is that you have access to almost any crowd control, utility, or mobility that you would like. Obviously, you don't have access to all of it, but the choices of which you pick are actually way better and actual choices as opposed to what we have right now in Dragonflight. And I'm talking about stuff like Stormbolt, Intervene for Mountain Thane, Shockwave, of course, Spell Reflect and Intimidating Shout. That kind of stuff is what I'm talking about, and they're all way easier to get if you so desire. And I did mention Shockwave because, as they promised, they moved Shockwave from an actual capstone all the way to the top of the talent tree, where it is now, as it always has been, just a utility ability and not something that can also do damage. Although the theme of doing damage with Shockwave is something that I want to experience and I'll never get again. But you can actually get it and have its cooldown reduced as well to be like a super short, probably the fastest duration stun in the world. There are still potential issues with the talent tree where you have dead talents, particularly the left side. Stuff like Cacophonous Roar and Menace are probably something that you're never going to be picking considering how many other nodes you need. You might be able to take Wrecking Throw. I did play a little bit with it during the testing of the warrior, specifically in the Rookery dungeon, where there were a lot of mobs with shields and the last boss has a shield, and you will be using this almost on cooldown for 60-70% of the dungeon, which that is great. That gives you some value to it. You might sacrifice stuff like a Stormbolt or like a Shockwave, or depending on the hero talents that you pick, to get this, especially if your group doesn't need it, because it does end up doing a lot of damage. That is great and fine, but you're likely not gonna get anything more than that. Bitter immunity is probably still dead. It's an interesting idea for a defensive, would be great if we could take it, but once again, it's at a point in the talent tree where you just cannot afford to take those nodes, since you will 100% be forced into overwhelming rage because you will want double time. You'll probably not take Crushing Force anytime soon. You don't ever use Slam as Fury unless something's wrong, and Overwhelming Rage is just universally better. But at the same time, I am not sold off on what you do with Dual Will Specialization and Endurance Training, because as far as this row is concerned, and this is the problem with the throughput, where most classes have access to all of their throughput through their talent tree, Warrior has to choose, and it doesn't feel that great. You will always get Cruel Strikes, you will always get Wild Strikes, and you will always get Armored to the Teeth. Most likely, unless the trade-off is just very obscure and has to be simmed. Dual Will Specialization increases the damage that you do by 5%. That sounds like a lot, and it probably is, and you will have to sacrifice something for it. One of the points probably from Armored to the Teeth, I would imagine, because you do need Wild Strikes to get to Avatar for both your talents, and you do need Cruel Strikes specifically for Slayer because it gives more damage, and it's likely that Cruel Strikes is more damage than Armored to the Teeth. It might not be. You might be taking a point away from Cruel Strikes for what Dual Will Specialization, and all of this to say, once again, that Endurance Training is something that you're never going to be picking, which is a great talent. It gives you a lot of defensives and survivability in terms of raid, makes Warrior a tanky class, which is great, but you're probably not going to take it, which is a problem. As far as the spec tree is concerned, the big thing that's on everybody's mind is Bladestorm, and it is back, and it is a choice node with Ravager, both benefiting from the capstones of Hurricane that we know and love. Hopefully you love it. Or the other one that's aptly called S, lowercase, which gives either of these two abilities an extra stack. They deal less damage, but they also generate a 10 more rage through their duration, because baseline Bladestorm does not actually generate rage. One interesting change that you will notice very early in the hero talent tree is that your enrage buffer has been put as a choice node. You now have frenzied enrage, which is making enrage what you knew and love and what you play with right now, giving you 15% haste and increasing your movement speed by 10%. Spoiler alert, this is what you will be using 100% of the time. And the new one, Powerful Enrage, just makes Enrage increase the damage of your abilities by an additional 15%, and Enrage duration is increased by 1 second. Outside of actually doing some maths and knowing exactly the stat distribution that Fury is going to be going through towards the end game, Frenzy Regen is just better. You could say that Powerful Enrage might be the end game choice, since you're probably soft capping haste at that point anyway, and maybe getting 15% is not that great outside of just doing flat more damage on all of your abilities. That sounds like what this might be intended for. However, neither of the two hero talents trees feel better if your spec is slow, and since a lot of classes go easily over the soft cap of haste, doesn't really make a good argument for Powerful Enrage to ever be good. I would like to have this choice because it sounds interesting. I don't think the 15% additional damage is great, and even if they buff this to like some stupid amounts, you will still feel worse playing Fury with Powerful Enrage than Frenzied Enrage. There's no world where Fury feels better if it is slow. Unfortunately, that is how the spec is designed and nothing's gonna change, so I don't know if Powerful Enrage will remain by the time the expansion launches. And since we're talking about dead talents, Reckless Abandon has been taken to the back of the house with a gun to the back of its head, and you're never going to take Reckless Abandon, considering that anger management is more or less required for both of the hero talents to be taken, because Slayer wants you to use bladestorm and anger management reduces the cooldown of bladestorm, and Mountain Thane wants you to use Ravager and anger management reduces the cooldown of Ravager. And even if you don't take that, it still reduces the cooldown of Avatar, and you want that for both of the hero talents. So I don't know what choices you'll ever have with Reckless Abandon unless it's going to be turbo buff to kind of compensate for that. But then again, it becomes a counterintuitive situation where if a new player looks at either of the two hero talents and looks at the choice node between Reckless Abandon and anger management, they're gonna say, oh, anger management is clearly what's supposed to be working with these two, so why is this a choice node? I think they should be broken apart into two separate talents so that you can opt to take Reckless Abandon if you so desire. Odin's Fury is also dead. Dead in the water, dead dough, never going to be risen, never going to be picked. You're not taking Odin's Fury ever. It's first of all expensive to get because you have to go through depth experience and a lot of bloodthirst buffers, but it just doesn't do that much damage. The reason why it worked really well in the Mirdrasil was because of the tier set. So outside of a tier set, it's never going to be taken, since if you play either of the two hero talents, which you're going to be doing, you're definitely getting anger management, and you're definitely getting one of the bladestorm capstones, and you're likely going to get Onslaught. So the only choice for you to get Odin's Fury if it gets tuned to be better than Onslaught, which is good luck with that. That's all I'm gonna say. And still, you'll have to spend way more talent points to get Odin's Fury, because for both Onslaught and anger management, you just have to put points into Swift Strikes. But for Odin's Fury, you have to put points into Deft Experience, which I don't think is going to be better than Swift Strikes to say that you can use Deft Experience for both anger management and Odin's Fury, giving you enough points to go all the way down to what I would imagine would be Hurricane as your ideal choice of capstones on the bottom right. Single-Minded Fury, of course, is dead, and I do have an overall arcing question with the Bloodthirst talents, with the new hero talents, but we will get that individually when we reach that point, because first we need to talk about the patrons that are supporting the content that we do. Thank you guys, you are amazing and wonderful. It's not that great to focus on YouTube revenue, since it's a little bit unreliable and at the mercy of the ads and all of that stuff. So having reliable patrons is great, and if you like our content and you want to see more of this in the future, consider supporting us. The link is down in the description. You'll also have access to bloopers and 4K custom-made wallpapers with your character, Patreon talks and podcasts and things like that, all good stuff, and we would be super grateful for it. Thank you very much, because we need to talk about Slayer. The one that sounded the coolest in terms of the gameplay, actually playing with it felt a little bit blander than I thought, mostly because, sure, Bladestorm actually does way more damage and Execute actually does way more damage, and playing with them on Fury feels a little bit lackluster, which is something that a lot of people have predicted, since this is definitely something that sounds like is something made for ARMS, which I am a fan of. ARMS is my preferred spec. The only reason we're doing a Fury video is because you guys like Fury more than ARMS, and we like to please you with YouTube content. As far as Fury is concerned, outside of this just doing more damage, it doesn't really impact you too much, and the only impact this would have would be in its damage. You get the occasional bladestorm proc. The problem with is that this was also bugged on alpha, so I might change my mind, since on alpha the cooldown reduction for bladestorm didn't really work, and not only did it not work, I couldn't tell if my bladestorm was off cooldown, as you can see from the footage, because the icon didn't update. So I would have to occasionally stop my rotation and try bladestorm out to see if the cooldown is back, because obviously we're not playing with add-ons on the alpha. At least I couldn't, and I wouldn't. But there are a couple of things that are really cool. Things like Relentless Pursuit. Charge removes all movement impairing effects and grants 70% movement speed for 3 seconds. I cannot tell you how good this feels to charge and almost have mount speed for 3 more seconds. This is such a good quality of life change when it comes to your mobility. Of course, Vicious Agility is also really cool, and I'm still waiting for the Leap Quake build that Warrior 110% needs to have in the future. There are most likely issues that haven't been addressed yet, issues like tunnel vision, which makes it impossible to fight in AoE with tunnel vision, and even in most raid scenarios where you do have adds to address, hopefully that gets changed, because I was kind of forced to play Thrill of the Kill. And we get to the problem of Bloodthirst versus Raging Blow, because Raging Blow usually just wins out as a talent option outside of tier sets being a thing, because Raging Blow just deals more damage, because building towards Raging Blow in the spec talents, which that part hasn't changed, is better for your overall performance. However, Slayer has a lot of talents that buff Bloodthirst. So will we double down on that and build Bloodthirst talent in the class tree, because that is what this sounds like to accomplish? I don't know, because once again it's not counterintuitive, and the Bloodthirst talents haven't been buffed to be at least competitive with the Raging Blow ones yet. But enough about that, let's talk Mountain Thane, the one that actually surprisingly felt way better to play than Slayer. Oh my god, this is the most fun I've had in Warriors since almost ever. Although still mostly passive behind the scenes, the little procs that you get, and actually one of the coolest talents ever, has changed how I view Fury and has changed my choices of hero talents for sure. First of all, Call of Thunder is the best thing since sliced bread, and this one talent should be what all hero talents will be. To explain why Call of Thunder is the best thing since sliced bread, we have to talk about Lightning Strikes, the core functionality of Mountain Thane, making damaging enemies with Thunderclap, Revenge, Raging Blow, or Execute have a 15% chance to also strike them with a Lightning Bolt, dealing damage as nature damage. Lightning Strike occurs 50% more often during Avatar, hence why you want Avatar, hence why you also want to be casting a lot of Raging Blows with this one, going back to our previous discussion of Bloodthirst versus Raging Blow. So this is what Lightning Strikes are and where you get your nature damage from. So when that damage procs with 5% more damage, and it also makes Storm Strike ignore armor. Storm Strike is naturally nature and physical damage. But the important part is this: Seismic Reverberations, improved Whirlwind, Meat Cleaver, and Barbaric Training improved Thunderclap as well as Whirlwind, functionally making Thunderclap replace Whirlwind in your rotation, which is exactly what Mountain Thane should do, which is exactly what hero talents should be doing. You no longer have to Whirlwind to get your AoE cleave effect going, you can actually do that with Thunderclap. Now, of course, there's the discussion of, will Thunderclap deal more damage than Whirlwind? To accomplish that, will you just ignore this? I don't know. I just pressed Thunderclap because I wanted to, not to mention the Thunderclap synergizes with the rest of the hero talents. Thunder Blast, where your Thunderclap turns into Thunder Blast, dealing Storm Strike damage, going back to, you know, what we talked about, Call of Thunder. This gameplay loop is incredibly fun, but once again, outside of this just being turbo fun, I still have to mention about the Bloodthirst versus Raging Blow, because first of all, we have Strength of the Mountain, where Bloodthirst and Rampage damage is increased by 10%. So not Raging Blow, although Raging Blow is what you want to do to get your Lightning Strikes going. You also have Burst of Power. Lightning Strikes have a 20% chance to make your next 2 Bloodthirst have no cooldown. So wait, this time you're going to be spamming Bloodthirst with this talent. Okay, that's a little bit confusing. What about Thorim's Might? Lightning strikes generate 3 rage, that's great for Fury. Revenge, Raging Blow, and Execute, damage is increased by 15%. What obviously this talent tree is supposed to accomplish is to make you use both of those ability, which that's great in and of itself, but what does that mean for building your class talent trees as a Fury Warrior? Will you be speccing heavily into Bloodthirst or Raging Blow? That's part of why I believe this is a little bit confusing, because you cannot go both ways, and ideally you would be going Raging Blow, but it feels like you're going to be casting so many Bloodthirst that you don't really know if you should take more Bloodthirst talents to kind of do more damage. And outside of that little gripe, it was a lot of fun to play, and once again, this is alpha. Most likely what you see in this video is not what's going to be making it into the live game, but it is putting out the conversation out there so that maybe hopefully the devs see this, or maybe you guys can give your opinions about this and get a discussion going on what the best way to move forward with Fury is, because it could be like Red Paladin, which is moving forward with the speed of a freight train with no brakes, with the rework and Templar and Herald of the Sun, all that we have covered in this video already. Go check it out.